The Nevada desert baked under a merciless noon sun in 1882, the horizon shimmering with heat. Dust swirled lightly, clinging to sagebrush and cracked earth. Dine Marshall rode slow across the plain on his bay horse, his broad shoulders slumped under a worn hat. At 38, his face bore lines of loss. His son taken by fever 3 years back, his wife soon after, broken by grief. His dark eyes scanned the land, more out of habit than hope. He lived alone now in a weathered cabin, tending a small herd, his revolver always close but rarely drawn. Trust was a luxury buried with his family. Dane wasn't out for pleasure that day. He was checking traps, his stomach tight from lean weeks. The sun burned through his shirt, sweat beading on his brow. His horse snorted, ears twitching, and Dane's hand grazed his gun belt, senses sharp. Nothing but dust and heat. Then he saw it, a small figure stumbling near his barn, half hidden by scrub. At first he thought it a stray animal, thin and faltering, but as he urged his horse closer, he saw clearly. A child, no older than 5, barefoot, legs scratched raw, her skin darkened by sun and dirt. Her ragged cloth dress hung loose, barely covering her trembling frame. She swayed, then collapsed, hitting the ground hard. Dane froze in the saddle, heart pounding. A child alone in this desert meant trouble, raid, sickness, or worse. He scanned for riders, smoke, anything. Only wind answered. He swung down, boots striking earth, and approached slow, knowing a wrong move could scare her. She was conscious, barely, her dark eyes wide with fear, lips cracked from thirst. A strip of leather clutched in her small hand seemed her last tie to life. Dane raised an empty hand. "Easy, little one," he said, voice low. She flinched but didn't run, too weak to move. He knelt, keeping distance, mind racing. Raiders? A lost family? The memory of his son's fevered face hit hard, and he pushed it down. "You're alone," he muttered, not expecting a reply. Her eyes flicked to his, then away. He pulled his canteen, poured water into his palm, and held it out. She crawled forward, drinking desperately, her small tongue lapping like a starved animal. Dane's chest tightened. She wouldn't last another hour out here. Decision came fast, as it did in the desert. He couldn't leave her to coyotes or the sun. He lifted her gently, her body shockingly light, bones sharp under skin. She clutched his shirt with weak fingers. He set her in front of him on the saddle, her small frame pressed against his chest, and rode for his cabin, the barn's shadow growing closer under the searing sun. The choice was made, but questions lingered. Who was she? Was someone searching? As the cabin appeared, smoke curling from its chimney, Dane felt the weight of what he'd done. He'd taken her in, and whatever came next, danger, judgment, or answers, he'd face it. The cabin came into view, its logs baking in the midday sun, smoke curling thin from the chimney. Dine dismounted, carrying the girl inside, her head lolling against his arm. The air smelled of wood smoke and leather, the room sparse, a stove, a rough table, a bed against the wall. He set her on a blanket by the hearth, her small body curling tight. He poured water into a tin cup, holding it to her lips. She drank fast, choking once, water spilling down her chin. He steadied her, his calloused hand gentle, and warmed beans in a pot. She ate slowly, eyes darting to him, as if waiting for the food to be taken. Dane watched, his heart heavy with questions. Who was she? Where was her family? By afternoon, she sat up, clutching a rag doll he'd pulled from a shelf. His wife's work, meant for a child they never had. Her small fingers gripped it tight, her eyes less wild but still wary. Dane knelt nearby, pointing to himself. "Dine," he said slowly. She stared, silent, but her shoulders eased slightly. He didn't push. Silence was something he knew well. He stepped outside to haul water, keeping the door cracked to watch her. The desert stretched quiet, but he felt unease. A child alone meant someone might come looking. Family, raiders, or trouble. Back inside, he showed her how to splash water on her face, wiping dirt from her cheeks with a rag. Her scratches and bruises stood out starkly, and Dane's jaw tightened. She was too young for such marks. He gave her bread, tearing it into small pieces, and she ate with less fear, her eyes flicking to him with a hint of trust. He thought of taking her to town, but the idea soured fast. Town meant questions, stares, and judgment for an Apache child. He'd seen how folks treated her kind, whispers of savages or worse. No, she'd stay here until answers came. As the sun climbed higher, Dane worked outside, mending a fence, the girl sitting on the porch with the doll. Her eyes followed every sound, alert like a hunted animal. He hated that look on her. He chopped wood, his swings sharp, but paused when she flinched at the noise. "It's just me," he said, softer than he meant. She didn't reply but relaxed slightly. By late afternoon, he sat with her on the porch, the heat softening. He pointed to the doll. "You like that?" Her nod was faint, but it was something. He felt the cabin shift, no longer just his shelter, but hers too. Questions pressed harder now. If her family was out there, they'd come soon. If not, what then? He thought of his son, the fever that took him, and the grave by the creek. He'd sworn never to carry another's weight again, but here he was, feeding a child who wasn't his. As the sun dipped, casting long shadows, he carried her inside, setting her by the fire. She curled up, asleep in minutes, the doll tight in her arms. Dane sat, staring at the flames. The cabin felt less empty, but heavier too. He'd made a choice, and whatever came, raiders, kin, or town gossip, he'd stand by it. For now she was safe, and that was enough. The next day the sun beat down, dust rising with a sharp midday breeze. Dane was outside, splitting logs, the girl perched on the porch, her doll in her lap. Her eyes were brighter now, less haunted, but still alert, scanning the horizon. Dane's axe paused when he caught her stiffen, her small body tensing. He followed her gaze to a ridge where a figure moved, staggering through the brush. His hand went to the rifle leaning nearby, instincts flaring. The shape became clear. A woman, bronze-skinned, her deerskin dress torn at the hem, long black hair whipping loose in the wind. Her steps faltered but held purpose, her face etched with desperation. As she drew closer, Dane saw her clearly. An Apache woman, thin but strong, her dress frayed but adorned with faded beads, her skin gleaming with sweat. She stumbled, catching herself, then froze when she saw the girl. A raw cry tore from her throat. "My child!" And she ran, dropping to her knees as the girl bolted toward her. They collided in a fierce embrace, the woman clutching her daughter, tears streaming as she pressed her face into the girl's hair. She murmured Apache words, her hands roaming the child's face, checking for harm. The girl clung back, her small voice breaking into soft sobs, the first sound Dane had heard from her. Dane lowered the rifle, heart pounding. He saw the woman's grief, the kind he knew too well, loss that hollowed you out. She looked up, eyes wild but softening with relief. "You kept her safe," she said, her English broken, voice hoarse from days of searching. Dane nodded, stepping back to give them space. "Found her yesterday, fainting by the barn," he said, voice steady. "She's eaten, rested." The woman, Lyra, she said her name was, swayed, exhaustion hitting hard. Dane caught her arm as she stumbled, her pride resisting but giving way. He guided her to the cabin, the girl clutching her mother's hand. Inside, he sat Lyra in a chair, pouring water into a tin cup. She drank fast, coughing, her hands trembling. The girl, Nia, curled against her, still holding the doll. Lyra's eyes darted around the cabin, wary but grateful. Dane leaned against the table, questions burning. "What happened?" he asked. Lyra's gaze darkened. "Raiders killed my husband, took others. I ran with Nia, but she lost in storm." Her voice broke, hands tightening on her daughter. Dane's jaw clenched. He knew that kind of loss, the kind that left you raw. "You're both staying," he said, the words coming before he could question them. Lyra blinked, startled. "Why?" she whispered. Dane looked at Nia, then back at her. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything. I won't let it happen again." The cabin grew quiet, the fire's crackle mixing with Nia's soft breaths. Lyra's eyes held his, searching, and for the first time, Dane felt something beyond duty, a pull toward her, not just to protect, but to keep her close. As the sun streamed through the window, Casting light on Lyra's tired face, Dane knew this was no longer just about shelter. It was about choice, and he'd made his. Midday sun poured through the cabin's window, warming the wooden floor. Lyra sat by the hearth, Nia curled against her, the rag doll tight in the girl's arms. Dane woke early, as always, and had already hauled water and fed the horse. The cabin felt different now, less like a shell, more like a place holding life. Lyra's presence, though quiet, filled the space. Her torn dress slipped at the shoulder, revealing bruises from her journey, but she moved with purpose, stirring a pot of beans. Dane watched her, then looked away, ashamed of the stir in his chest. He busied himself with chores, but his eyes kept drifting to her. Lyra rose, helping without being asked, sweeping the floor, mending a blanket with his needle and thread. Her hands were quick, though they trembled from exhaustion. Nia followed her, quieter but brighter, clutching the doll. Dane showed Lyra the water barrel outside, and she washed Nia's face, her own hands steadying. He noticed her bruises, the way her dress clung to her frame, and forced his gaze away. "You need clothes," he said gruffly, fetching an old shirt of his wife's. Lyra hesitated, pride in her eyes, then took it, pulling it over her torn dress. She nodded thanks, her gaze softening. By afternoon, Dane rode to check traps, leaving Lyra and Nia inside with the door bolted. He scanned the horizon, wary of raiders or curious eyes. The desert was quiet, but he felt tension. Word of an Apache woman in his cabin would spread fast. Back home, Lyra had warmed bread, setting a plate for him. They ate in silence, Nia between them, her small hands tearing bread. When their fingers brushed passing the plate, Lyra didn't pull away, and Dane's chest tightened. "Why you alone?" she asked, her English halting. Dane's jaw worked. "Lost my wife, my son. Fever took them." He paused, the words heavy. "Didn't want to care for anyone after." Lyra nodded, her own grief mirrored. "I lost all but her," she said, touching Nia's hair. The day wore on, and Lyra helped with small tasks, stacking wood, washing tin cups. Nia played nearby, her laugh soft but growing. Don carved a wooden ball for her, and her eyes lit up, chasing it across the yard. Lyra watched, her face easing into a faint smile. As the sun dipped, casting long shadows, Dane sat on the porch, Lyra beside him. Their shoulders brushed, the air heavy with unspoken words. "You gave us safety," she said softly. Dane met her gaze. "You gave me something too." The words surprised him, but they were true. The cabin wasn't just his anymore. It was theirs, and that truth settled deep. Dane knew trouble was coming. Town was a day's ride, but ranchers passed through often. An Apache woman and child under his roof would draw stares, maybe worse. But as he watched Lyra hum an Apache song, Nia playing at her feet, he felt his resolve harden. They belonged here, no matter what the world thought. The day ended with the three of them in the cabin, the fire low, the air warm with their shared presence. The sun climbed high, baking the cabin in relentless heat. Dane noticed Nia's cough first, a dry rasp that cut through the morning's quiet. By midday, her small body shivered under the blanket, her forehead burning. Lyra's face tightened with panic, her hands pressing damp claws to Nia's skin, whispering Apache prayers. Dane's chest knotted, memories of his son's fever flooding back. He stayed calm, fetching water, stoking the fire, but inside fear gripped him. He'd buried one child. He wouldn't lose another. Lyra's eyes were wide, desperate. "She'd die," she whispered, voice breaking. Dane shook his head. "Not if I can help it." He brewed willow bark tea from his supplies, feeding it to Nia drop by drop, holding her head steady while Lyra supported her trembling body. The hours blurred, damp cloths, whispered prayers, and Dane's low voice soothing both mother and child. Lyra pressed against him once, her face buried in his chest as Nia shook with chills. He wrapped an arm around her, steadying her without hesitation. Her torn dress slipped, baring her shoulder, but fear left no room for modesty. Dane thought of the town doctor, a day's ride away, but taking an Apache child there meant trouble. Questions, suspicion, maybe violence. He weighed the risk, his jaw tight. For now, he'd fight the fever here. He changed cloths, kept the fire steady, and watched Naya's every breath. Lyra worked beside him, her hands trembling but relentless, her prayers never stopping. By late afternoon, the fever held firm, Nia's small body limp. Dane's heart pounded, but he didn't falter. He carried water, brewed more tea, and spoke softly to Nia, telling her to hold on. As the sun dipped, casting golden light through the window, Nia's breathing eased slightly. Lyra wept, clutching her daughter, her tears falling on the girl's hair. Dane sat back, exhaustion hitting hard but relief heavier. Lyra turned to him, her eyes raw with gratitude, and without warning, kissed him fiercely, her lips pressing hard against his. Dane froze, then kissed her back, his hands at her waist, pulling her close. The kiss was deep, urgent, pouring out fear and need. When they parted, her breath was uneven, her eyes locked on his. "You save her," she whispered. Dane brushed a strand of hair from her face, his hand lingering. "I saved us all," he said softly. The cabin grew quiet, the fire's glow softening the room. Nia slept, her fever breaking, the doll clutched tight. Lyra leaned against Dane, her shoulder against his, their hands touching. The danger wasn't over. Town whispers, raiders, or fever could return, but in that moment, they'd won. Dane felt the weight of their shared fight, the pull of something deeper than duty. As daylight faded, he knew this wasn't just about saving Nia. It was about choosing Lyra, choosing a family no matter what lay ahead. The desert sun hung high, dust rising with a sharp breeze. Dane was outside sharpening a fence post when 3 riders appeared, their horses kicking up clouds. He recognized 2 from town, ranchers with hard eyes and sharper tongues. The third was a stranger, his smirk mean. Dane's hand rested near his revolver, his posture firm. Lyra stood at the cabin door, Nia behind her, clutching her doll. The riders reined up by the fence, their gazes sliding over Lyra's torn dress, her bronze skin gleaming in the light. Don's fist clenched, but he held steady. "Keeping strange company, Marshal," the lead rider said, spitting in the dirt. "An Apache woman and her brat? Town won't like it." Don stepped forward, eyes like stone. "They're under my roof. That's my business." The stranger laughed, harsh. "You'll bring trouble on us all, playing house with her kind." Lyra stiffened, her hand tightening on Nia's shoulder. Don's voice dropped, cold. "You want to make this trouble? Step down." The air grew taut, the only sound the creak of leather and the wind's low howl. The riders hesitated, weighing Dane's resolve. Finally, the leader sneered, "This ain't over." They wheeled their horses and rode off, dust trailing. Dane watched until they were gone, then turned to Lyra. Her eyes were wide, fear mixing with trust. "They hate me," she said, voice low. Dane stepped close. "They don't know you. I won't let them touch you." Inside, they sat by the fire, Nia asleep. Lyra's hands trembled as she mended a blanket. "You risk for us," she said. Dane leaned forward. "I've lost too much to lose you now." Her eyes glistened, and she reached for his hand, her fingers warm against his. The touch lingered, heavy with meaning. The days after felt heavier. Dane rode to town for supplies, feeling eyes on him, whispers about the Apache woman in his cabin. He ignored them, but the weight followed him home. Lyra saw it in his tightened jaw, the way he kept the rifle close. She worked beside him, mending, cooking, her presence steadying the cabin. Nia's laugh returned, chasing the wooden ball Dane had carved. But the threat loomed. Don knew the riders might return, or worse, bring others. He checked his traps twice daily, scanning for tracks, his revolver always loaded. One afternoon, as Lyra planted herbs by the cabin wall, Dane sat on the porch watching her. The sun lit her hair, her dress patched but still slipping at the shoulder. She glanced at him, her smile faint but real. "You make us home," she said. Dane's throat tightened. "You made it one too." Their eyes held, the air thick with unspoken promises. The cabin was no longer just a shelter. It was theirs, and Dane would fight for it, no matter who came next. The sun dipped low, casting golden light across the cabin yard. Lyra knelt by the herb patch, her hands steady in the dirt, Nia playing nearby with the wooden ball. Dane watched from the porch, his heart lighter than it had been in years. The rider's threat lingered, but the cabin felt like a fortress now, built not of logs but of their shared resolve. Lyra's presence had changed everything. Her quiet strength, her soft hums filling the air with Apache songs. Nia called Dane Pa one morning, her small voice breaking the quiet. Lyra's eyes glistened, but she didn't correct her. Dine built a small bed for Nia, setting it beside his own, the axe sealing something unspoken. Lyra stood, brushing dirt from her hands, her patched dress catching the light. Dane joined her, their shoulders brushing. "You gave us home," she said, her English stronger now. Dane's throat tightened. "You gave me one too." She turned, her lips finding his, the kiss deep and deliberate. They stood together, Nia's laughter echoing, the desert no longer empty. Word spread to town, and stares followed Dane when he rode for supplies. Whispers of Apache lover stung, but he didn't care. The cabin held 3 lives now, bound by loss and choice. One afternoon, Lyra carved a small wooden figure, a man, woman, and child, and set it by the hearth. Dane touched it, his fingers tracing the rough shapes. It was theirs, a symbol of what they'd built. The desert could bring raiders or judgment, but they were family now, and that was enough. As the sun set, bathing the cabin in warm light, Dane stood with Lyra, Nia between them. Their hands touched, the future uncertain, but theirs to face together. Thanks for joining this tale of love and survival. Hit that like button if it touched your heart, and subscribe for more Wild West stories.